Hello and welcome to my PM archive. In today's video I'm going to do something different from my usual content. Instead of making an opinion-based video, I'm going to make an explanation video. And what I'm going to explain is my experience with American school concepts in cartoons. And what I mean by this is that I grew up with a lot of cartoons like Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, which portrays the American school system, and that's what I grew up seeing on TV. But I'm not American, so the school system I have experienced in real life is quite different from what is in these shows. And in this video I'm going to tell you which concept I have learned from these shows and how they differ from the school system in my country. First up, I want to say that I know that some of these things can be very generalizing, that not all American schools necessarily have the things I'm going to talk about, and that it is possible that there are schools in my country that has some of these concepts, but this is my experience with these different concepts and their differences between America and my country. First up, I'm going to talk about the school lockers, where you have your books and different stuff. I've seen this in, what comes to mind is Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide. From what I remember, they're usually green, and there's often in many of these shows episodes with people either forgetting the code to their lockers, or people who are moving their other people's things into their lockers if it's easier, or if they are girlfriend and boyfriend. Something I didn't realize when I was a kid that I have come to realize as an adult is that we actually don't have these lockers in my country's school system. We don't have a place to store our books. We only have them in our backpacks. So we don't really have this concept. But I'm very familiar with the concept due to these different cartoons, but it's actually not a thing we have where I'm from. Another thing I've become very familiar with is the idea of a school canteen where you can pay for your food. We don't really have that. I have not experienced a canteen in any schools for kids. We don't have that. We simply don't have the opportunity to buy food at our schools. We have to have it with us from home. One series that comes to mind where I remember the canteen specifically is Recess. And I remember it because one of the characters did this thing where he used some flowers to get the lunch lady to give him more food, and I really found that very funny as a kid. But as I stated, that's not a thing we can do here. I'm now going to talk about something that I have realized is actually drastically different between the American system and my school system, and I really hope some of you will find this difference interesting. I certainly found it interesting to learn the difference between our two systems. I have, through countless different shows, learned about the different clubs that are in American schools and the different stereotypes associated to these clubs, like the sports guys, the theatre club, and the debate club. I think it's really interesting to see these different sorts of people being shown in these different cartoons. But as in many of my previous points, we don't have that in our school system. We don't have it integrated into the school. We don't have a sports team, we don't have theatre clubs, and we don't have debate clubs. If you go to sports or theatre or anything like that, you're going to do it outside the school. It's not going to be a part of your school. It's not going to be related to school. So you might not even meet someone from your school. So you wouldn't know if your classmates were into sports or theatre. Well, you would if they told you, but you wouldn't know it by the activities they do in the school. It's not going to be a part of the school. We don't have large plays by the theatre clubs or anything like that. We don't have big sports games. So you wouldn't necessarily know what people's interests are, and you wouldn't be able to have this big stereotypical group. Of course, people with common interests still find together and still talk about it, but it's not going to be in the same way as it's portrayed in American schools, because it's not a part of the school system. Another point is that in many of these shows, if you have a different club, or if you belong to something, you sit at the same table. As the previous point stated, we don't have canteens, so most schools for kids actually don't have big places where we have these different tables. You're just gonna end up eating in the classroom with your classmates, regardless of what their interests and hobbies are. Next point I'm going to talk about is the election of a student government president. I remember a specific episode of The Replacements where the brother and sister both decided to go for this election, and I found that episode very interesting. This is usually portrayed in what I would describe as a very American way, and this is not meant as a negative statement, but it's done in a way that's similar to your presidential elections. You're supposed to win over votes from the many different people at the schools, to my understanding, and usually in these episodes you are the person who is running is trying to get votes from the different clubs by doing things they would find interesting or saying things they would agree with. If I've understood this concept correctly, we have something similar in my school system. We have a student council where every single class chooses a representative and a vice representative. So if the representative is sick, the vice representative then goes to the meetings, and in these meetings there's discussions about things that can be done to improve the school, things the students want. And this is then going to be taken to the leaders of the school, which are going to try to see what they can do about the students' proposals. I'll talk about two concepts that I, through my experience, think are very big and very important part of the American school system, but isn't present in my school system. And the first one is a school mascot. As previously stated, we don't have sports teams, so we don't have big matches between different schools, and therefore we don't really have school mascots. We don't have that need for a school mascot, but I really like the idea of a school mascot because it gives the different students at the school something to rally behind, something to connect them. I really like the idea of that, but as stated, we don't have it. A cartoon that I remember that really made me sort of remember and understand the idea of a school mascot is the show called Fillmore. It had this entire episode based upon the school mascot doing a crime in the school. The second concept that I have experienced that I think is a really big part of the American school system is the cheerleaders. I have experienced this concept through many shows, but one I remember is Kim Possible, because, well, Kim Possible is a cheerleader. Due to the same reasons that we don't have a mascot, we don't have cheerleaders, because there's no need for cheerleaders, because there isn't any sports activities for the school to participate in, so we don't need people to cheer for the sports team. And although we don't have cheerleaders, I've always been really impressed by the cheerleaders in this show, their capabilities with gymnastics and how they can make all of these interesting and really amazing things. I think it's a little bit sad that I haven't had to experience it in real life, but as stated, there's really no reason for them to be a part of my country's school system. My next point is something I've become really familiar with, but it's always very weird when shows try to translate it, and it's the American grade system. How you use A to F to grade what people get from their assignments. And specifically, I remember learning that F is failed and is the worst one through Timmy Turner. This is interesting because I found the American system easy to understand, but hard to translate into my country's system. We run a very different one. We have numbers instead of letters, and it's not 1, 2, 3, 4. No, it's 0, which means you failed. It's 2, which means you did the minimum of what was required. It's 4, then it goes 7, then it goes 10, and then it goes 12. It's always very interesting to see when cartoons that are translated tries to translate the different grades, especially if it's in a cartoon where they show the grade, and for instance they may show an F and then say the corresponding number in our system, which just doesn't really fit together. The last point I'm going to talk about is the science fair. It's not something I have experienced in the schools I've attended. It is possible that some of the schools do have something similar. I really actually like this idea about having to create a project and show it, but I also understand that it can be very, very stressful and very annoying to do, and it's very easy to sit here and say, oh, it sounds interesting, if you haven't experienced it. A show I vividly remember showing a science fair is Phineas and Ferb. Of course, I have seen this in many, many different other shows, but this is the one that comes to mind. So now I'm going to give you a little bit about my opinion about this. Not the American school system, but the fact that it is such a big part about the cartoons that I have been watching as a kid. I think it's very, very good because it has given me an understanding of a different school system, even though I didn't realize it as a kid, and that all of these things I've seen hasn't really been able to translate to what I've experienced in real life. As I've grown older, I have got an appreciation for the understanding that I now have of an entirely different country's school system and the difference between our school system. If I have to point out something that's bad about it, it is not something I have experienced, but something I could see someone experiencing, would be that it makes unrealistic expectations. You could, for instance, have a little child who really looks forward to becoming a cheerleader in their school, and then when they start their schools doesn't really have this. Thank you for listening to this video. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope you learned something different. The idea of this video was to give people an insight into a different school system than the American ones. I'm aware that there are many, many different countries with many, many different school systems, but I really feel like that most of the shows I have experienced has been a very American one. So I hope someone who sees this is going to find it interesting, just as I found it interesting to research and learn about this. I hope my small references to different cartoons and TV shows wasn't too distracting from the main topic. I just really wanted to have it in there to give you an idea about where did I see this and what did it teach me. As always, this has been my opinion archive. I hope you liked the video. I hope you consider subscribing, and I hope I didn't get too many of these facts completely and utterly wrong. If you have any comments, anything to say, any points you might want to hear my opinion about, or any points you might have an opinion about, maybe you are in the American system and can tell me this isn't as general as I might think, or maybe you are in a completely different school system and be like, oh, some of the things you talked about your school system we have too, or some of the things we don't have but we do it like this. I would really like to hear about it, and if you have a TV show that taught you something specific, then please tell me about it. Maybe I saw it too, maybe we can talk about it.